started. And then people will probably trickle in, while we have this. So welcome to the New York Information Security Meetup / the Cyber Guild. I have the great pleasure to introduce Tia Hopkins to the group. Hi, Tia. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. You are also on Eastern time zone. You're in New York, right?
I am, yeah.
Good. So we just talked about grabbing a sandwich. We just said, hey, it depends on the time zone. You never know these days, where people are. So why don't we just kind of jump right in and maybe kind of walk us through, what you've done in your kind of your past career. How you started in cybersecurity, what attracted you to it. What potentially what was the turning point? I find people have somewhat luck and circumstance sometimes, but also a turning point where they kind of got the first role. So maybe you can kind of give us a brief overview of that.
Yeah, sure. I don't know about the brief part, but I'll try.
No. Hey, go ahead. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I've always kind of had an interest in IT in general. And so, I can remember as far back when I was like 12 years old, my mom bought me a computer, and instead of using it, I disassembled it. And needless to say, she wasn't happy about that. So I also built my first computer at 12, had to put it all back together. But when it came to official education and things like that, it was tough because back then it was just we were good at computers and there wasn't a lot of definition around it. There weren't all these initiatives like you have now, like getting young kids into STEM and girls who code, things like that. So I was just kind of on my own figuring it out. So I ended up going to college for computer engineering, which was not what I wanted to be doing. I quickly learned. And so, from there, I got a bunch of different stuff out. And I ended up actually working for the phone company as a DSL installer. And that was my first kind of real taste of IT, because when you install high-speed internet, then there's how do I get this on Wi-Fi? How do I get it on more than one computer? And so that's what really kind of dragged me into information technology. So from there, so I could start having more intelligent conversations around Wi-Fi and multiple computers on a network, I actually built a lab at home. So I got a bunch of cheap computers, got myself a PC for Dummies book, got a networking for Dummies book, and it was off to the races from there. I was in Miami at the time, so I think I did that for about 7 years, and then I actually moved up to New York, still doing DSL, but quickly transitioned into an IT role as like a network systems admin. Fast forward a bit, I stayed in IT for a number of years and landed a role as an IT director at a managed services provider. But then after about 5 years, I said, okay, I need to get my life together. I need to figure something out. It had been years and years of me figuring things out and doing my own research and building labs and just kind of being curious and smart and probably lucky in some cases. And so I wanted to specialize in something, one, and then I wanted to get some education certifications behind me, too. So when I did research on like the job market, prospects in terms of what was available, I would say job openings and what employers were looking for, and basically what was hot at the moment, my options appeared to be cloud, DevOps, and cybersecurity. DevOps was out for me. I've been running from programming my whole career, whole life really, because I kind of dabbled into it a bit when I was in high school, and apparently I was decent at it, but I didn't love it. And then cloud was just too new for me, just from the perspective of how I was looking at the market. I didn't feel like I'd be able to drive a ton of value at the time. And so I picked cybersecurity, and it seemed like the wisest transition given my background in networking, and just thinking outside the box and really wanting to understand how things work and being curious and not being afraid to kind of, take things apart, et cetera. It felt like it really aligned to who I was as a person. And so I just kind of went all in from the perspective of certifications, educations. I ended up getting 2 master's degrees, one in information security, one in cybersecurity, and then just a laundry list of perks like the Security Plus, CISSP, and things like that. And that transitioned to my first cybersecurity role, which was supposed to be a systems engineer where I was doing implementations. But I would say probably 6 months into that role, I was put on a call with a customer, and I was yanked out of doing implementations and put in a pre-sales consulting role. And that transitioned into what I do now, which is actually leading a global team that does pre-sales engineering for cybersecurity organizations.
You know what's amazing, Tia, and again, I want to dissect some of that. First of all, just in terms of being able to, I mean, most people that I know, they fall into the one role, and for you it was like DSL installer or whatever, and then they kind of keep on going and kind of like stumble onto the next role and not necessarily have much direction in terms of where they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
For you, it seems like you again, you analyzed the kind of job market, you eliminated the options, and then once you decided you want to do cybersecurity, you went all out. I mean, 2 masters, that's amazing, right? And then obviously I'm assuming you were working full time, right?
Yeah.
So you decided to go all out in terms of education and then pursue like your first job in cybersecurity. What was the driver behind this? And maybe this is something you kind of talk about and kind of recommend to others, because again, I think most people kind of drift into their roles. You seem to had like a kind of real directions, in terms of where you wanted to go, and you pursued it like with all your might, right? You kind of decided to go out and do the education piece and everything else. But what kind of like was the driver behind it, like, to kind of look at what the marketplace is? And did you have like role models or people that you looked up to? What kind of like made you make that choice to move into that space?
Yeah, that's a good question, a funny one, because I actually did not have any guidance whatsoever. No, no mentors, no one that I was like looking up to that was doing it well, so I could say, hey, I want to do that. I don't really know. I think just when I was younger, I found myself in a lot of situations where the outcome of situations that I was in was not favorable and could have been avoided if I had done a little more research or asked a couple more questions. And so that kind of drove me into the type of individual that I am now, where I research everything right before I make a final decision. I mean, I'll dabble, I'll try things out, but if I fully commit to something, it's the result of just doing a ton of research and making sure it really aligns to what my desired outcomes are. And when it comes to doing a job search, you really can't pull that off unless you analyze yourself first, right? Like, what am I good at? What skills of mine are going to help differentiate me in whatever job market I choose? Do I really love this path that I'm going down? Am I passionate about it, or am I pursuing it because someone told me I can make a lot of money? You have to be honest with yourself about those things. Otherwise, you'll just jump into things because they sound good, and you'll end up in this cycle of not really committing to or finishing or progressing in anything because you're always bouncing around because you haven't found that thing that really speaks to you. And of course, leaving a role as an IT director, and I wouldn't consider it a huge transition, going from an IT role to more of a focused IT role, but it is still a big move going from being in a leadership role back to individual contributor, right? So I wanted to, one, make sure it was worth the risk in terms of fulfillment, but also the potential reward at the other end had to be worth it as well.
And didn't it scare you that, obviously the cybersecurity is a male-dominated field, or at least more so back then. Did you pay any attention to that, or you said, okay, it doesn't matter to me, I'm going all out and I'm going to just pick that one, and I don't care that it's very little women, few women's in this particular role. And then, you also mentioned specifically that you knew what you did not like, right? So you said you don't want to go in DevOps and development and so on. And maybe you can talk a bit about that. How did you manage to cope with the fact that I'm assuming even in your master's degrees, you're probably, one of the few females, right? Few women that were taking it. Did it make any difference to you, or just you decided to do it anyway, or was it weird to be like in a class with all men?
No, I mean, I think for me then, now, there's rarely anyone in any room that looks like me. So, you could look at that from a number of different perspectives. So I had to, at a very young age, learn how to have thick skin, and it served me well. I don't really pay attention to what's going on around me. Like, it's about me and what I'm capable of doing, and focusing on that, because if you focus on what the industry looks like or what somebody might be able to do that's better than you, then it affects your own confidence. It affects your ability to believe in yourself and just push forward to become better at maybe the skills you're lacking in. So yeah, no, I shut all that noise out and just do what I do for me.
And it's very powerful. I think this is something that kind of a message that I think resonates with a lot of people, and women, not just women, but just people in general, that if you something you really want to do, you should just basically approach it almost like being in a bubble. Just go ahead and do it. And also in our prior conversation, you specifically mentioned that people have a misconception about cybersecurity and how tough it is, and the fact that potentially you require a technical background and so on. What's your take on it? We talked a bit about that. You mentioned that you advocate for people to go into the space and just tell them, hey, there's a lot of other options. You don't necessarily have to program.
Yeah. So two answers to that. I mean, one, in terms of advocating for it, I actually started a nonprofit called Empow Cybersecurity, and it's focused on getting more women of color into the cybersecurity space. And part of the challenge is the perceived barrier to entry into cybersecurity as a career. Individuals think you have to know how to code, which I think I just debunked that, because I couldn't code if my life depended on it. There's a perception that you have to have some sort of strong technical background, which is also not the case. I mean, for me, if you are the type of individual that is curious and, passionate, and this is what you love, like, the technical skills can be learned, if you're willing to put forth the effort. If you even want to go down a technical path, right? You've got risk, governance, compliance. There's organizations that have, marketing at cybersecurity organizations. There's HR roles in cybersecurity organizations. So those are also lower sort of entry points into the field, because once you're at a tech or at a cybersecurity company, the game kind of changes for you, because you're in it, you're living it, and you're hearing things that you wouldn't hear if you weren't within that organization. And then you have a front row seat into what a day in the life really looks like, and you can figure out what to focus on. So I am really big about both bringing awareness to cybersecurity in general as a career that doesn't have as high a barrier to entry as people think. But also, you do have the ability to be successful in a cybersecurity role without being what I like to call a keyboard warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the time to say that when I asked for some time to talk about before 8 a.m., he said, hey, 8 a.m. is half my, I'm already half through the day. I wake up at 5 and I do a bunch of stuff, and you're giving back to the community. You're also a professor, right? You teach at university, right?
Yeah.
And so where do you find the time for all of this? You teach in university, you're running a not-for-profit, you have a senior role in a company, with customer facing and so on. Where do you find time for all of this? I mean, it's very inspiring.
Yeah, and don't forget my PhD program, right?
That's right. I totally
go back to school again. Yeah, I don't. No, it's true. I steal time from people as I talk to them. So you're gonna wake up tomorrow and realize you only have 23 hours in the day. So, but no, I mean, it is a considerable amount of time management, because I also have my family to think about as well, and they're my top priority, because doing all these things is great, but if they're suffering, not having my time or attention as a result of it, then for me that immediately means it's not worth it. So it's almost like I have to function in my household as if it's a business, because I have to set the proper expectations in terms of timing and when I'm available, and block my calendar off because this is family time. But getting really specific about the amount of time that I'm going to carve out for specific things, and staying really focused on doing those things within that time frame. Obviously, my day job conceptually is 8 to 5, 9 to 6, but I'm like you said, I'm a leader at the organization, so things come up all the time, which make it challenging. So you have to be focused and also flexible. But yeah, I do start at 5 a.m. every day. I love the quiet between 5 and about 8:30 a.m. It's just so peaceful. I can focus and get things done. And then, the madness starts at about 8:30 and runs straight through about 6, 7 o'clock. And then I have I guess you could call it a cool down where I recap the day, make sure there's nothing that's going to impact what I'm, need to do the next day that I might need to tackle before I call it a day. And then it's family time, my time, what have you.
Yeah, it sounds like you have the kind of the time management down path, and you kind of have everything scheduled, which is pretty amazing. And obviously, you managed to do a lot in short time. So, talk to me a bit about your existing role right now, and what you like and kind of maybe potentially don't like about it. You're customer facing right now at eSentire. Maybe you can just talk to me about the what you cover, what the company does, and just in general what your day to day looks like. That like 9 to 6 or 9 to 7.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk about it from the perspective of what I was doing when I first started there, because I was hired on as an individual contributor. So eSentire is a provider of managed detection and response, which essentially means we have an outsourced security operations center service. So we have two global SOCs in Canada and in Ireland, and we essentially protect our customers' environments from cyber attacks by 24/7 hunting for threats in their environment and also taking action for them. So if we find something, we respond to it for them. So my team is actually paired with the sales force, and we go out and position our services to customers, and talk to them about their pain points, gaps in their environment, their ability to keep up with all the noise being generated by their tools, etc. And the team that I lead now, that I started on when I was hired, my team is responsible for gathering all the information around points of concerns, problems that we're trying to solve, what the infrastructure looks like, how we're going to integrate, and then we put the solution together that's best going to meet the needs of that specific customer. So at a high level, that role is typically referred to as pre-sale or solutions engineer or solutions architect. And another thing I'm really passionate about is bringing more visibility and awareness to that type of role as an option in cybersecurity and in tech in general, because when you go out and you do all the career path mappings, you end up in a SOC analyst role or on a blue team, a red team, pen tester, all these things, risk compliance, privacy. But I don't see technical sales often. And it's a great role to be in. It's still technical. I'm having to have difficult, both in the weeds, technical discussions about infrastructure and the appropriate security controls and tools, et cetera, but also very broad business discussions. So it is a really nice blend of demonstrating technical skills in combination with soft skills, and it's lucrative, which isn't bad either.
Tia, I completely agree with you. I basically do similar type of roles, or done this similar type of roles, and the other element of it is very satisfying because you're coming in and you're listening to the customers' issues and problems, and then once you come back with a solution, and and they're very thankful. You build a very, very strong trust because you provide you help them with the kind of their job and their concerns and so on. And then, typically if you shine, they shine. Right. So it's a win-win. So leading to that, what do you see currently are kind of the major concerns for for customers, for enterprise? When you come in, what are kind of the top 3 things you hear?
I think top 3 would be
top 2.
Not enough internal staff to handle the security practice. If they do have a fully staffed security team, maybe they're not able to do it 24/7. And then also just being able to keep up with all the noise that's coming out of the security tools in the environment, right? Because typically that results in sending all the logs to a SIM and writing some rules and responding to some alerts. But the challenge there is you have to write the rules and keep writing the rules and keep tuning the devices that are sending the logs to trigger the rules. So that's a full-time job in and of itself. And you combine that with you don't know what you don't know. So maybe you didn't write a rule for something that you need to be able to detect in your environment, and then you can't. Or maybe you did write the rule, but the device you have in place isn't detecting what needs to be detected, so the log never gets there. So, there's some gaps associated with that. A lot of organizations realize that, but it really just does come down to the load that's associated with really effectively managing a security and program from an infrastructure threat perspective, and then also being able to do it 24/7.
Yeah, and you also mentioned specifically they have all these tools and they have a plethora of like alerts from all these different tools, and it's almost unmanageable. How do you solve that issue? And even if they did not use your services, what would you recommend to organizations that's trying to kind of get a grasp of the control of the kind of the risk associated with running a large infrastructure?
I do think, to your point of risk, it is a matter of really understanding what the risk to the organization is, and then prioritizing the financial, the tooling, policies, et cetera, that you want to align to those risks as you prioritize them. And then that's how you kind of decide how you want to select your tool set. What you don't want to do is say, hey, I was in this webinar and they said we need endpoint protection, we need endpoint detection and response, and we need DLP, and we need email gateways, and then you have tool sprawl, you have things everywhere, and you put them in place because it was recommended, but it wasn't aligned to the risks associated with your organization. And when you approach it from that perspective, it's I won't say you're missing the point. I don't want to generalize, but you do leave yourself open to missing what actually needs to be protected in the environment, because you get yourself into a position where you're not really focused. So I would say do a broad security risk assessment in the environment, prioritize the risk, and then choose your controls accordingly. And then once you have that in place, you can kind of prioritize where you want to focus on tuning specific tools according to how they need to function in your environment, because you can't turn it all the way up. It's going to make too much noise, and you'll be, chasing down false positives all day long. And then that's going to drive you to the other end, which is over tuning it so it doesn't make as much noise. And then that leaves you susceptible to missing things that you should be detecting. So it's not easy. Let me just put that out there, right? It's not easy to manage.
And it sounds like it's almost a moving target as well,
it is.
Right? You always have to kind of tweak it.
Yeah, because today you assess and you compare to, the threat landscape, and you're like, okay, we're good. And then tomorrow there's something else, some new, variant of ransomware that everything you just did doesn't have the ability to detect. So that's another full-time job.
Right. And when you come in, and I'm assuming you come in as kind of the subject matter expert, right? So you walk them through almost like a discovery call where you're trying to find out, what are the main concern, from a security perspective, what is on the roadmap, what type of tools. What are the key questions you ask them when you come into one of those initial conversations? And then when you leave, and I know kind of the general question, what makes you feel good about that meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that you feel like, oh yeah, this is kind of a perfect client. I really can help them. They're open to listen to what I have to say, and they'll be a great fit for eSentire as a customer.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, of course, all of the questions around the security stack, what do you have in your environment with your cloud presence and things like that, understanding the lay of the land, that's academics. But for me, the biggest the thing that's the biggest for me, I need to come out of my discovery meeting knowing what problem I'm actually trying to solve. Because our solution solves a lot of problems, but I need to be able to articulate the solution back to the prospect in a manner that solves their specific problem. It can't be generalized, right? Like I can't just pull a slide deck out of my arsenal and put it in front of a customer and say, here's what we got, because it has to speak to their specific outcomes. So a good meeting for me is understanding the lay of the land, understanding what their challenges are, and most importantly, what their desired outcomes are. What does perfect state of my security program look like? And so that's what makes me feel good about the meeting itself. If I come out of a meeting and I don't feel like I have that nailed down, then I'm going to have to make some assumptions, of course. So it's always better to get it. In terms of when I feel like, yes, this is a great customer for eSentire, I always feel that way because, we are pretty, agnostic to the tools that customers have in their environments. And every organization needs to be looking for threats in their environment 24/7. But the real point there is the ability to respond to what's found. So you also have lots of organizations that invest in a lot of tooling that lets them know what's going on. So they're good from maybe a prevention perspective of blocking known things and maybe a little bit of tools that let them know when the prevention has failed. But when you get to the response piece, that's typically where you find organizations are really light in teams, process, and technology that will enable them to actually do something that's effective once something bad happens.
And how do you, and this is great, by the way, so this is a great discussion. How do you potentially, set expectations? I'm assuming this, they call you to say, okay, we want pie in the sky. You're going to be 100% secure.
Yeah.
And how long is that going to take and how much money is going to cost me? So then how do you kind of take that and say, okay, hey, hold on for a second. Let's see what we can solve first and then what that kind of roadmap looks like.
Yeah, so I think that's a little easier for us because we are covering the entire environment, depending on, which services they subscribe to. But we have the ability to have visibility into the entire environment, which actually helps with customers being able to figure out where their IT spend needs to be, right? So they might think, oh, we need to go upgrade all of our firewalls, but we're monitoring their network saying, no, you might want to invest in some security awareness training because your users are clicking on a lot of bad links, et cetera. So, for us, it's not really a matter of prioritizing one security hole over another. Like we're that dome that we're going to put around your entire organization. So you can be underneath that dome figuring out all of the other, little intricacies. So, we're not a tool. We're not going to solve for email gateways and, we're not sitting on endpoints, analyzing files and things like that. What we're doing is pulling all of the data passing through your environment and sifting through it and looking for threats and responding to those. So through that, we can help organizations prioritize where their focus should be in terms of IT spend. And then we also do advisory services as well. So, pen testing, vulnerability assessments, the tabletop things like incident response planning. So we have a holistic approach to the security program in general.
So Tia, from my experience, it's not all roses, right? It's, sometimes, things can be challenging. Sometimes things don't work as expected. Sometimes you have, challenging customers, right? Not everybody is, the customers are potentially, it's my way or the highway, or they think they know everything and so on. So how do you deal with that? And maybe you can provide, without naming names, of course, is maybe provide some kind of a incident where you had more challenging, customer and how you, dealt with that specifically.
Yeah, I think any service provider is going to face the challenge of talking to an internal team that's concerned about, well, if we bring you in here, what am I going to do? Or am I going to be concerned about my own job? Are you taking my job away from me? You're replacing me? Because if that's the case, I'm just going to poke holes and, we're not going to buy this.
I think you just described the elephant in the room.
Yeah. So it really is a matter of knowing what those things are and speaking to them before it becomes a concern, right? If I know I'm going in talking to a security team, I'm going to level set right away that I'm not here to replace you. I'm here to make sure you're able to focus on more high priority things in your environment. So that's part of it, understanding your audience, preparing yourself for the concerns that specific audience may have. Like, for example, if I'm talking to a CFO, I don't know that they're going to care so much about, who's doing what as much as they care about how much is this going to cost. And can we get rid of anything? And this sounds really expensive. Like, what are you really doing for me, right? So number one, like I said, understanding your audience. But there will be times where you're not prepared. Like something will just come up. It'll be something you haven't thought of. But I think even worse, it's an irrelevant question that has nothing to do with anything that you've talked about. And there's someone in the room that just wants to try to add some value and ask a tough question, because obviously in my case, I'm the technical resource. So in those situations, it kind of becomes stump the chump. Well, let's see what we can ask her that she doesn't know. So the way I handle those situations is, ensuring that I've established rapport in terms of the information that I'm there to deliver, right? I'm an expert on my solution. I am not an expert on your environment, right? So let's get that straight now. And so here's the information that I'm here to deliver for you. Now, if you ask me a question that's difficult for me because it's specific to your environment, then usually what I do is push back a little bit and say, tell me more about that. Tell me more about why that's a concern for you so that I can make sure I'm answering that properly. And when you pass the ball back, sometimes the ball hits the floor and you get to move on, with the meeting. But in situations where it is a valid question, I like to make sure that I've already established enough rapport that I can say, you know what, that's a good one. I've never been asked that before. Let me take that away and get back to you and, kind of joke about it. This is great. I'm going to learn something today. And that's fine because it also validates everything else you said in that meeting, because you got to a point where you said, I don't know. That means everything else you said, you actually stand behind. And so I think what makes it challenging is how people feel about it, especially technical field resources. The tendency is to feel like we have to have an answer for everything. But sometimes saying I don't know is more valuable than trying to make something up just so you don't have to say I don't know.
And I love that. And I love the confidence of which you said, well, sometimes I just have to push back. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just have to say I don't know. And I think that's very valuable. And I think that a lot of people are very good at what they do, like you are, have come to the conclusion that sometimes you just have to do that. And all the time, as you mentioned, emotions are involved.
Yeah.
Right? As people are emotional about their job, emotional about the risk, and so on. So I love that. I love that answer. Thank you. Yeah. So you are, and we were kind of getting close to the top of the session here. You are now a hiring manager. Mm-hmm. What type of skills and qualities and attributes and potentially cultural fit do you look for when you are interviewing somebody for a potential position?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so for me, a resume has already told me pretty much whether you're qualified to be in the role from a technical perspective, right? And so when I have conversations with candidates, I do ask questions to validate that technical aptitude, but I also want to know, are you willing to go beyond that, right? Because just because you've been doing X, Y, Z for 20 years and you're phenomenal at it, I need individuals on my team that are remaining curious, that are continuing to do research and staying ahead of what's out there, right? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about threats to our customers, which change every day. And I don't want to have a situation where we show up to have a customer meeting and a customer or prospect knows about a threat that we don't know about. Well, that doesn't look good, at all. So curiosity is important. Aptitude to learn continuously. And these are all soft skills I'm describing, obviously. Being personable. What are your communication skills like? A lot of times I'm able to kind of lower the tension in the room just because I come in and I'm a person. I had a conversation with a prospect not too long ago, and they were asking me, well, what happens if we connect with service with you? What happens with the sensor? And I'm like, dude, you're talking about breaking up with me and we haven't even started dating yet. And it was a good laugh, but that sometimes I do take that approach of kind of just being human and relaxed, and but again, of course, know your audience. But when I'm evaluating a candidate, this might sound a little silly, but part of what I ask myself is, would I want to have a drink with this person? Are they someone that I actually want to talk to? And that's important, especially in cybersecurity, because you cannot do an effective job as a technical resource or as a pure sales resource if you're not able to get the trust of the individuals or gain the trust of the individuals that you're speaking to. It's not like I'm, selling storage or cloud, that's not as guarded. But in these cybersecurity conversations, like, we're talking about crown jewels here. And for me to protect you, I got to tell you, where I'm vulnerable. So I really need to feel like you have my best interest in mind, and you're not just here to, kind of sell me on what you think. I mean, more importantly, that you're not going to take my information and be irresponsible with it. So yeah, technical skills, obviously, right? You need to understand network threats and endpoint threats and how they proliferate throughout the environment, and the importance of threat intelligence and just management of a security program in general, but also how to talk to people, how to read a room. So if I show up with a presentation based on the information I got that I needed to be prepared with, but I see the room wants to take it a different direction, well, I need to go that direction. I can't just pull everybody back, to my slide deck. So being flexible is important, and I mean, just excited and passionate, right? Yeah, it doesn't, I don't feel like I've ever sold anything a day in my life, because I'm having very helpful security conversations. I'm solving problems, and I'm super passionate about what I do, and I'm helping companies. So I do look for passion as well. But of course, in any interview, like, how much do you know about my company and why do you want to be here? That's number one for me, because I don't want a super job, or this sounded cool. And not that a candidate will come out and say those things, but sometimes answers that I do get kind of lead to that. So, if you're talking to the hiring manager and can't articulate anything of value about the company, even just why you want to be there, that doesn't say to me that you're really passionate about this specific role. It says to me you're just kind of fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tia, the passion comes through, this session. It sounds like you're passionate about a lot of things and everything you do, and it's been absolutely amazing. So, fortunately, we kind of ran out of time, but maybe just in the kind of last minute or two, maybe provide insight to how is best to reach out to you. Maybe whether it's for non-for-profit, or just like maybe potentially mentorship, or like guidance. I think you're an inspiration to a lot of women in the space. So I don't know if there's a kind of best way for people to reach you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. If you look up Tia Hopkins, you'll be able to find me. I also have a website, easy too, tiahopkins.com. And then, my nonprofit is empowhercyber.org. But you could find it on my website or on LinkedIn as well. And then, my company is eSentire.com. So, wow, I'm really available, huh? I just I'm everywhere. I just realize there's a lot of easy ways to get in touch with me.
Fantastic, Tia. It's been absolutely great, and I'm hoping that the things are going to open up again, and then maybe we can have you and continue to in person in New York City at one of the kind of monthly events for the New York Information Security Meetup.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
And then we can do the litmus test to see if we like to have a drink together after. Fantastic. It's been great. Thank you very much all for joining, and thanks Tia again for taking the time to speak with the group.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Much appreciated. Take care.